All right, let's jump right in. Today, we are breaking down a concept that is absolutely fundamental if you want to get any project done on time and on budget. Seriously, it's a simple but incredibly powerful unit of measurement that, once you get the hang of it, will completely change how you plan things out.
So does this sound familiar? You've got a project, it kicks off, everyone's excited, there's so much promise. But then, somewhere along the line, things just start to slip. The budget starts to balloon, and that deadline, it's suddenly looking more like a suggestion. It's a classic story, and let's be honest, it's super frustrating.
And these are the symptoms we all know, right? When the planning is off, you don't just miss a date on a calendar. Your team gets totally burned out, you suddenly realize you're understaffed, and the financial pressure just keeps building. It all feels so complex, but you know what? The root cause is often way simpler than you'd think.
In fact, a huge number of these problems can be traced right back to how we measure the most basic ingredient of any project: human effort. If you can get this one unit right, everything else starts to click into place.
And that magic unit is the man-hour. You'll also hear it called a person-hour or labor hour these days. This is the absolute bedrock of project estimation. The key here is to stop thinking about time on a clock and start thinking about the total volume of work that's needed to get a job done.
So how do we actually calculate it? Well, it's surprisingly simple. It starts with the first, most obvious piece of the puzzle. How many people are actually doing the work?
And then you just multiply that number by the hours each of those people actually puts in on that specific task.
And that's it. That gives you your total man-hours. Now, what's really cool about this is the insight it gives you. Think about it. 48 man-hours of effort is the exact same amount of work whether it's 8 people working for 6 hours or 6 people working for 8 hours. The total effort stays the same.
Okay, so we've got the theory down. Now, let's get into the practical side of things and see how you can use this to build a rock-solid estimate for pretty much any project you can imagine.
It really just boils down to a simple 4-step process. First, define your scope. Are we talking about one tiny task, a whole phase, or the entire project? Be super specific. Second, count everyone who's touching the work. Full-timers, part-timers, contractors, everybody. Third, you got to track their hours carefully. And finally, you just apply that simple formula we just went over.
Now, if you stop right there, you're already way ahead of the game. But there's one more crucial layer that separates a pretty good estimate from a truly great one. This is the secret to making your plan actually reflect reality.
And it all starts with asking this question. I mean, come on. We all know the answer is no, right? An employee might be on the clock for 8 hours, but life gets in the way. You've got meetings, emails, coffee breaks, random distractions. They all take a slice out of the day.
And this chart just nails the reality of it. Take a software developer, for example. In a typical 8-hour day, they might only get about 5.5 hours of that deep, focused, productive work done. The rest of the time, it gets eaten up by all that other stuff. Ignoring this gap is exactly where most project plans fall apart.
So to fix this, we use a neat little tool called the productivity factor. It's basically just a simple multiplier you apply to your raw man-hour calculation to make it way, way more realistic.
And here are some pretty typical benchmarks to give you an idea. A manufacturing role might be 80 to 90% productive time. But something like software development with all the meetings and context switching, that's often lower, maybe around 60 to 75%. Using a factor like this is an absolute game changer for accuracy.
So you've calculated your total effort and you've adjusted it for real-world productivity. Awesome. Now let's make those numbers actually do something for us by translating them into things like staffing needs and budgets. Okay, this is where we need to get clear on the difference between two key terms. Man-hours measure effort. That's the total volume of work. FTE, on the other hand, or full-time equivalent, measures headcount. That's the number of people you actually need. They're related for sure, but they answer totally different questions. An FTE is just a standard unit. It represents one person working full-time for a whole year. And the magic number you need to remember is 2,080 hours. This is your key for turning that big effort number into a concrete staffing plan for the year.
So, for example, let's say you calculate that a massive project is going to take 4,160 man-hours to finish over a year. You just divide that by our magic number, 2,080, and there's your answer. You need a budget for 2 full-time employees or 2.0 FTEs to get it done. It's as simple as that.
Look, if you only take one single thing away from this explainer, please let it be this. The #1 biggest mistake in project planning is ignoring all that non-productive time. The consequence is always the same.
You underestimate your costs, and you set deadlines that are basically impossible to meet. And the fix is so simple. Always, always apply a productivity factor.
So just remember this, the best plans don't start with a calendar, they start with a simple calculation. So before you set your next big deadline, ask yourself, have you really calculated the effort? What's the first thing you're going to calculate?